Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show for Thursday, February the 3rd, 2022. Just a reminder that in approximately 90 minutes, I am going to speak about Adrian Lyne's 1980 teen drama, Foxes. This is the second COVID-free Thursday. I just thought I'd give you all a break from this never-ending story, this tale of panic and misery and incompetence at every level of society. But I'll have more on that subject tomorrow, of course. I was talking about Whoopi Goldberg yesterday, and as loath as I find myself being on the same side as John Podhoretz, or what do they call him, Pod Junior, Mini Pod. He blocked me on Twitter after I referred to his father, Norman Podhoretz, and then they used the phrase regression to the mean with regard to him. But nevertheless, this is from the Daily Wire. Amanda Prestigiacomo, columnist, author, and former presidential speechwriter John Podhoretz criticized The View co-host Whoopi Goldberg, whose real name is Karen Johnson, for her controversial comments about Jews, race, and the Holocaust, urging the actress to give up the surname she co-opted and doesn't deserve. Podhoretz said in a New York Post column Tuesday that performer Karen Johnson did not land on the last name Goldberg because it signified whiteness. Johnson chose Goldberg because it would represent the proud ownership of her outsider status. She wasn't trying to blend in. She was doubling down on race. Notably, the co-host insisted this week on The View that the targeting and extermination of millions of Jews during the Holocaust had nothing to do with race. After she was blasted for the comments, the host seemed to double down and bypass an apology. I think of race as being something that I could see, Goldberg told talk show host Stephen Colbert. So I see you and I know what race you are. I mean, how ignorant is this woman? People speak of the English race, Scottish race, the Welsh race, the Irish race, French race. She never heard of this before. She said, I felt differently. I expect everything everyone is saying to me, and I don't want to fake apologize. I'm very upset that people misunderstood what I was saying. Note, please, that Karen Johnson didn't become Whoopi Rockefeller, Podhoretz pointed out. No, she knew that by becoming Whoopi Goldberg, she would be choosing to flaunt in every possible way the fact that she was a minority person in a majority white country. The Goldberg was the cherry on top. So it would seem that John Podhoretz does not believe that Jews are white. This is not a view that the vast majority of American Jews hold. Back when Johnson became Goldberg, Jews weren't considered white exactly, Podhoretz wrote. Yeah, all right. And they weren't not white either. The point here is that such a classification system is meaningless when it comes to Jews, no matter the color of their skin. Yes, all those black and Asian Jews. Of course, Israel played along with this, the myth of the black Jew some years ago, and it's led to, guess what? Enormous problems, say, in Tel Aviv. It's obvious that a 2022 version of young Karen Johnson would not choose the name Goldberg to gain that extra frisson of non-white pride, Podhoretz said. Whoopi Goldberg should just drop the Goldberg now, Podhoretz closed the Post. There are dozens of survivors of the Holocaust who bear the name, and an untold number who died in the Shoah with it. Karen Johnson stains them both. And in more celebrity news, this is from Lauren Overholtz at Fox News. Susan Sarandon seemingly shared a message to Twitter comparing cops gathered to pay their respects to fallen NYPD officer Jason Rivera to fascists on Wednesday. The image Sarandon posted featured a tweet written by podcaster Danny Haifong. The original tweet showed a photo of police officers lining the New York City streets and read, "I'm going to tell my kids this is what fascism looks like." Danny Haifong, another model minority. Sarandon's photo added the words, "So, if all these cops weren't needed for crime that day, doesn't that mean they aren't needed any day?" It is unclear if the photo was made by Sarandon or a reshared post. A representative for the actress did not immediately respond for a request for comment. Rivera and Wilbert Mora, 27, were shot on the evening of January 21st while responding to a report of domestic violence in Harlem involving a mother and her adult son, LaShawn McNeil. Manhattan's Fifth Avenue was a sea of blue Thursday as the hearse carrying 22-year-old Rivera's remains pulled up to uniformed officers saluting the fallen NYPD hero. The vehicle was escorted by police as it traveled to the historic St. Patrick's Cathedral from a funeral home in the Bronx's Riverdale and past traffic stopped in all directions along the way. Yeah, what are the cops learning from incidents like this? I guess if you get a domestic violence call from Harlem, take your sweet time getting there. Because I don't know, if a woman is being beaten there by a man and the police intervene and the man gets hurt or gets killed, these officers are going to be put through hell in kangaroo courts. So best to dither when responding to such a call. More entertainment news. And Tucker Carlson spoke about Jeff Zucker's firing from CNN Thursday. He said, "You probably heard CNN President Jeff Zucker got fired this morning. In a statement, Zucker said he had been dating a colleague, didn't disclose it, and when his bosses found out, they made him leave. That's not true. Everyone in the TV business already knew about Zucker's relationship with the head of CNN's marketing department. Every executive in television has known about it for years. It was definitely not a secret. So Jeff Zucker did not get canned for his sex life. New management wanted him out of CNN for other reasons, including bad ratings and maybe others that we'll find out later. So the relationship was just a pretext for what you saw. But as usual with CNN, you've got to wade through a lot of lies to get to what exactly happened. So what happens next at CNN? Well, for starters, let's hope to get rid of the eunuch and his weird pop-eyed accomplice. The two have made a career of trying to kill free speech in this country. No news organization should ever employ people like that. It's disgraceful. Still, on this day when we should be celebrating Jeff Zucker's departure, Tucker Carlson said, we're not celebrating. Why is that? Because we see a pattern here. There are an awful lot of contemptible leaders in corporate America, maybe most of them, but only a certain kind of CEO ever gets fired. It's not the weak ones, the guys who do what they're told, issue the cringy statements and let the HR department run everything. Those people tend to keep their jobs until they retire. People like that just want to get it over with and cash out. They don't take risks. They don't dare build anything. They're just caretakers. If their dignity is the price of job security, they are happy to pay it. More than any other time in our country, America is run by people like that. It's only the strong who are punished. Strong leaders tend to be abrasive. They're arrogant. Sometimes they're what we now call abusive. They ignore convention. They say outrageous things in public and private. And Carlson concluded, so Jeff Zucker, whatever else we have said about him and meant, Jeff Zucker tried to do something new. We hated what he did. We did not share his vision. We found it repugnant and destructive, but at least as Jeff Zucker had a vision, too few still do. Yes, the notion, which of course the media is going with, that Jeff Zucker was fired from CNN because of who he was having sex with is just risible. If in the news business, say, let's find out who everyone is having sex with. Ooh, and there might be some sort of conflict of interest here. There would be hardly anyone left. And that's another censorship story. This is from Tom Pyman at the Daily Mail. Mumford and Sons star Winston Marshall has blasted millionaire artists like Neil Young for risking Soviet-style censorship in the West after they demanded their music be removed from Spotify in a row over Joe Rogan's podcast. Young and Joni Mitchell are among the singers to distance themselves from the streaming service and its partnership with Rogan, who they accuse of spreading misinformation. Now, Marshall, who played banjo with Mumford and Sons before quitting last year amid criticism over his praise for a right-wing reporter, has waded into the debate. In a 1,444-word Substack essay, the folk star takes aim at a number of high-profile figures, quote, standing passionately against speech, unquote, including the singers quitting Spotify, and even Prince Harry and Meghan Mertz. He wrote last week, Canadian-American rock god Neil Young made a clarion call against free speech. Displeased by the Joe Rogan's Experience's contents, Young demanded that Spotify remove Rogan's podcast or remove him. Days later, Young's music was off the platform, though you can still stream his songs on Apple, ignore their forced Uyghur labor in Xinjiang, and on Amazon, but don't read about the company's infamous working conditions in James Bloodworth's book, Hired. Keep on rocking in the free world, Neil. Of course, Spotify is a private company. They're under no obligation to platform anybody. So while this campaign doesn't breach Rogan's First Amendment rights, it is a clear stand against the cultural norm of free speech. And those standing passionately against speech, a growing list that includes Joni Mitchell, Harry and Meghan Mertz, the comedian Stuart Lee, the singer India Arie, and Young's old bandmates Crosby, Stills, and Nash, are apparently all liberals. Strange that. Marshall, the son of Brexit-supporting millionaire Sir Paul Marshall, was attacked on social media last year after tweeting support for U.S. journalist Andy Ngo, calling him a brave man and hailing his important book, Unmasked, Inside Antifa's Radical Plan to Destroy Democracy. After a barrage of tweets accusing him of, quote, endorsing fascism, the group held crisis talks, after which bandmates Marcus Mumford, Ben Lovett, and Ted Duane, along with their management, reportedly asked Marshall to leave the group. Yeah, okay. I've got a pretty good idea what happened. They said, you can leave voluntarily and you can keep your share of the band or everything that you created with the band, or we can fire you and we can spend the next years in court, and God knows what you would receive. He said, I could have stayed in the band, but it would have meant self-censorship or lying, so I left. He then told how he'd experienced self-censorship before, claiming a BBC producer insisted prior to his show he was performing in that the accompanying orchestra be racially diverse, and so its players would be chosen by their immutable characteristics instead of their merit. This fellow is... he writes very well for someone in the rock business, I have to say. Let's take a look at the chat. Emmett Kelly's Earth. Hello to Anrun and Dan and Don from Beyond, Jeff Godley, John S., Paul Casso 88, Dan, Zen. Hello to Zen Master Football Analysis, GZ Style, Mephistopheles Ghost. Any pref for conservative leader? No, I don't, actually. I suppose Leslyn Lewis would be amusing because she's a socially conservative Black woman from Jamaica, and I guess we would hear, she's very Black indeed. I suppose we would hear a lot about how she's not really Black, But no, my choices are negative. Ronald Lee Ambrose and Michelle Rempel Garner, because if either of those women is chosen as leader, the Conservative Party will destruct, which I think would be a good thing. Emmett Kelly's Earth says Mitch Decter's attack on Russell Kirk was unforgivable. Indeed, it was. But Mitch Decter, Mrs. Norman Podhoretz, had this strange amount of power on the right wing in America. I remember in First Things magazine, there was a very interesting discussion in the late 1990s about just how horrible America would have to become before people could, in good conscience, disavow allegiance to it. And Judge Bork was involved and a lot of worthies. And apparently the word came down from Mitch Decter, stop it. Stop this conversation now. And they did, because I guess you just can't have Mitch Decter on your side. Russell Kirk has been who arguably was a co-founder of the modern conservative movement in America with his book, The Conservative Mind, in, I believe, 1953. He was effectively written out of the history of the conservative movement because he made a joke about Tel Aviv and neocons, which angered Midge Decter. Well, I guess it serves them right for inviting the neocons into the movement. The neocons took over and said, this is our thing now, not yours. And if you don't like it, if you disagree with us, get out or we will destroy you. Hello to John S. Quachalango. Tom Anderson asks, has Trudeau come out of hiding yet? Not to the best of my knowledge. Hello to Contracoup, who says the laptop class is so out of touch, they don't understand the concept of shift work. Okay. Stelter was up to midnight last night reporting, says Quachalango. Contracoup says, as if any individual policeman can somehow be on duty 24/7. And thank you for your comment, Susanna Berlinski, but I'm not going to talk about COVID today. It is COVID-free Thursday. Hello to V. Who. Gloria Miller, hello, quotes Brock Adams from the United Nations, who says to achieve world government, it is necessary to remove from the minds of men their individualism, loyalty to family traditions, national patriotism, and religious dogmas. And hello to Dr. Deadname, Justin Proto, and Dionysus. So, let's talk about safe spaces. This ridiculous Ilya Shapiro story becomes even more ridiculous. This is from Jeremiah Poff at the Washington Examiner. A group of students at Georgetown University Law Center demanded a space to cry and have catered food while staging a sit-in protest to promote the firing of embattled Professor Ilya Shapiro. William Traynor, the dean of the law school, met with the students during the protest Tuesday and promised the school would reimburse them for any food they had delivered to the sit-in. I don't know what it would look like, but if they want to cry, if they need to break down, where can they go? Because we're at a point where students are coming out of class to go to the bathroom to cry, one student protester said. The dean of students, Mitch Balin, oh, so we have dean of students at major American universities called Mitch now. He said, it's really hard to walk out of a class or a meeting in tears, and you should always have a place in campus where you can go. Reach out to me anytime, and we will find you space. The student protest came together after Shapiro had been placed on administrative leave following a tweet critical of President Joe Biden's announcement that he would nominate a Black woman to the Supreme Court following the retirement of Justice Stephen Breyer. Shapiro had endorsed D.C. Circuit Court Judge Sri Nivasan for the lifetime appointment, but said that because of Biden's announcement, the nominee would be a lesser Black woman. Shapiro says he expects to be cleared from any wrongdoing. Traynor said the comments from the students were really helpful and that it was particularly painful for the controversy to be at the start of Black History Month. The outlet also reported the student protesters demanded Traynor send an email reminding white students they were only there because of slavery and that this is something that these people needed to be reminded of. These people are just too sensitive to live. Honestly, would you want any of these people to be your lawyer? I don't think so. Shapiro partially apologized for his comments, saying that they were poorly worded. Why did he apologize at all? Once you get the first apology, then the pressure for subsequent and more fulsome apologies becomes, in practically every case, irresistible. He said nothing wrong. President says, oh, I'm going to pick an affirmative action Supreme Court justice. And that's not the controversy. The controversy is some law professor saying that, well, we're not likely to get the best choice because, if the hiring is done for AA reasons. That is the terrible, terrible statement. And speaking of sensitive people, Jessica Summers wrote this for the Daily Mail. And again, there are so many headlines today that would have been unthinkable 20 years ago, 10 years ago, maybe 5 years ago. Boo-hoo's self-confidence campaign urging people to be the real you and ditch filters is blasted by shoppers who claim the images are filtered and the models' faces are full of fillers. Boohoo has been slammed for appearing to use filtered images to promote its new no filter campaign, urging customers to be the real you. The fast fashion giant started its online Boohoo filter-free campaign last Thursday, but a number of shoppers have criticized the images the e-retail giant was using to boost the campaign, alleging the photos have been filtered and that the models are not natural because they have fillers, although neither claim has been proved. The initiative, which Boohoo hopes will eradicate comparison culture, was blasted as pointless. You're in the fashion industry and you're hoping to eradicate comparison culture. So I'm looking at a Boohoo model here. This is from an Instagram post. And this woman with long, very, very thick, dark brown hair. The caption is, "The real you is enough, hashtag Boohoo filter free." I don't need any proof. I can just look at this photograph. It's obviously filtered. No one's face looks like that. No one's face is as free as, blemishes or different colors on the face or gradations of color. This person looks artificial. Some of the photos of women shared by the brand seem to have custom effects with quotes about being the real you edited on top. Comparison culture is the phenomenon of social media users repeatedly comparing themselves to the filtered and curated versions of others. Why, thank you for that. A Daily Mail. A spokesperson said at Boohoo, stupid name, "We believe in empowering you to feel confident in your own skin. To help us support you, we'd like you to join us in our campaign to reduce comparison culture and eradicate filter abuse." And here's another thing. Okay, I'm looking at 3 pictures of these Boohoo models, and the first 3, these are very, very good looking young women indeed. But wait, what's this? As well as thinking the brand had used filters in the campaign, people criticized the use of models with fillers, and there is a picture of an absolutely terrifying looking woman with the weirdest eyebrows I have ever seen. And I don't know, maybe it's a man. Perhaps it's a man. Did anyone think, it's like the Last Psychiatrist, a famous post about Dove products and their campaign, just to be the authentic you. Is that why you buy beauty products, to be the authentic you? No, of course not. Here's an essay in the American Mind by Edward Erler called "Why They Can't Make Trump Go Away." In the election of 2016, Donald Trump appealed to citizenship, sovereignty, and borders. This was a direct entreaty to the people as the ultimate source of sovereign authority, bypassing the ruling class elites that dominate the media and the universities. His appeal also ignored political experts, pollsters, and government bureaucracy. In the postmodern world, the nation-state is under attack everywhere as the source of all evil, the cause of war, selfishness, racism, white privilege, misogyny, homophobia, transphobia, Islamophobia, and all the other so-called irrational phobias that make up the universe of political correctness. The idea of the nation-state itself is said to be irrational and arbitrary. All of this overwrought criticism of nationalism and the nation-state overlooks a very significant point developed in my new book, The United States in Crisis: Citizenship, Immigration, and the Nation-State. The nation-state is the only form of political organization that can sustain constitutional government and the rule of law. No empire has ever been a constitutional democracy or republic, nor will constitutional government exist in global government. If, as is widely alleged, the dialectic of history is inevitably tending toward global governance and universal citizenship, then it is also tending toward tyranny. The universal homogeneous state will not be a constitutional government based on the consent of the governed. It will be an administrative tyranny based on the rule of scientific experts. Science, not the consent of the governed, will be the basis for rule. There will be no citizens in this universal state. There will only be clients of the administrative state. We're clearly seeing a presage of the future of the world in today's United States, where administration has replaced politics and the Constitution. I'll have more to say on this subject when I speak about Christopher Lasch's book, The Revolt of the Elites, tomorrow on the Book Club. In that sense, Ehrlich continues, Trump's victory in 2016 was a defeat of the Washington establishment, including the leadership of both the Democrats and Republicans. His unexpected victory did not go unchallenged. The legitimacy of his election was questioned before Inauguration Day, and talk of impeachment began almost immediately. No, Ehrlich is wrong about that. Jeet here, noted Canadian, who's now an American, was calling for Trump to be impeached in the pages of the New Republic in December 2016. So then he goes into the first impeachment of Trump, and then the second impeachment. And then he talks about oligarchy, which is a word that appears a great deal in Lasch's book. He continues, anxious to eliminate any vestiges of Trump's foreign policy, President Biden moved quickly to cancel America First. Biden has meekly restored the multilateralism demand by the foreign policy elites who oppose Trump. The multilateral alliance has warned Putin that any advances on the territorial integrity of Ukraine will trigger severe consequences, economic sanctions, international condemnations, but probably not the promised membership in NATO that Ukraine desires and that Russia opposes. The Biden administration blusters that all options are on the table, and several foreign policy pundits predict this may actually lead to war. I'll have more in the Ukraine later on the show. This seems unlikely, but in light of the hysteria that seems to drive the administration and the warlike posturing of many elements of both the Democratic and Republican parties, a misunderstanding or an accident could be the spark that leads to a conflagration. But the real conundrum is the fact that the Biden administration is willing to defend the territorial integrity of Ukraine while deliberately destroying the integrity of the border of the United States for political purposes. The Trump administration had effectively secured the southern border and had made significant progress in solving the illegal immigration problem. Open borders, however, became the priority of the Biden administration. The president issued open invitations to foreigners, and soon his intentions were revealed to be perhaps the most cynical and politically destructive ever adopted in American history. It was to encourage and subsidize massive illegal immigration and use government resources to settle them in politically strategic districts that would benefit the Democratic Party in future elections. Many reports have surfaced about late-night flights moving newly arrived illegal immigrants to swing districts for resettlement. They arrive without advance notice to local or state authorities who are expected to accommodate them. These illegal immigrants will no doubt be expected to express their gratitude to the Democratic Party for the extraordinary efforts it made, however illegal it may have been, to accommodate these future voters. Efforts are already underway to make it legal for aliens, legal and illegal, to vote. Yes, this is clearly treasonous and worthy of impeachment. American democracy has, in fact, transmogrified into oligarchy. An alliance of corporate elites in the Washington establishment has been developing since World War II. Washington has long been in the business of picking winners and losers in the corporate world, and success has been increasingly dependent upon government access and government largesse. In recent years, the most important alliances have been between government and big tech. The wealthy elites in the corporate world and the world of big tech have formed an open alliance with the Washington establishment to complete the transformation of American democracy. This is a deadly combination, and it is easy to recognize for anyone who is willing to look. The American regime still retains the form of a republic, but its substance has been transformed into an oligarchy, the rule of the few for the benefit of the few. Politicians of both parties, but most strikingly Republicans, have found it easy to ignore or evade promises made to constituents. It is necessary for politicians in an oligarchy masquerading as a democracy to speak the language of the people and express interest in their concerns, whether they consider those concerns real or imagined. Yes, and he mentions the Tea Party, which was suborned by the Republican Party. Oh, we're on your side. No, the Republican grandees regarded the members of the Tea Party with a fear and disgust. Once again, how dare these nobodies protest against their oppression? The Obama administration, however, did take the Tea Party seriously and worked assiduously behind the scenes, using well-timed audits of donors, delays for approvals of tax-exempt status for Tea Party groups, leaks by IRS employees of the names of Tea Party donors, and other dirty tricks to delay and disable the movement. The Tea Party was surely taken out of play by these tactics in Obama's re-election in 2012. The Republicans, on the other hand, and the representatives of the oligarchic elites paid little attention to those whom Hillary Clinton called the deplorables. Trump, however, demonstrated that the memory of the people was not as fragile as the ruling elites thought. This is quite a long essay, but I've given you a flavor of it. This is by Edward Erler, E-R-L-E-R, and it is at AmericanMind.org. And what to do with Trump? What to do. How about put him in prison? Honestly, if these people want a civil war, arresting Trump probably would be the spark. This is from Pam Key at Breitbart. MSNBC contributor Jason Johnson said Wednesday on Deadline that former President Donald Trump was such a direct danger to democracy he had to be jailed. Johnson said, "I'm teaching a media literacy class to my students at Morgan State University." The level of cynicism that young people have towards the media, and then you mix that with old folks or older folks, boo, who've decided that there's only one place they want to listen to. It's hard for anyone to be an arbiter of truth, justice, and common sense at this particular point, or now, as a literate person would say. That's one of the reasons why I have concerns as to whether or not the January 6th committee can be effective in presenting their case to the American public. We know that there are 30% of the population that doesn't care. They don't care what the facts are. They just want Donald Trump in office. At this point, I don't care if he's found guilty of treason, if he's found guilty for violating records. I don't care if they find he has a blockbuster VHS tape from 1998 that he never returned and owes $100 million and has to go to jail. I don't care. The fact of the matter is the guy has been so obvious about being a direct danger to American democracy that he has to be jailed. He has to be punished, unquote. Wow. The projection is becoming almost unbearable. Oh, Donald Trump is the threat to democracy. These people have been saying for months now that if Donald Trump manages to be reelected in 2024, this will constitute a coup. They've already made it clear that Donald Trump cannot legitimately be elected president of the United States because he never was, because he was Putin's puppet. Evidence of this? None. Evidence of a conspiracy by the Hillary Clinton campaign, the FBI, the Department of Justice, to use the Steele dossier, which was paid for by the Clinton campaign, to bring Trump down. Evidence that the FBI knew that it was lying when it demanded FISA permission to tap his communications. Plenty of evidence of that. But let's talk about some good news. This is from Keith Griffith at the Daily Mail. Mark Zuckerberg's terrible year. Facebook's devastating decline in users caps off the turbulent 2021, in which the company was rocked by whistleblower allegations, major service outages, and constant controversy. Facebook stock was in a tailspin Thursday after the company reported a decline in daily active users. It follows a string of embarrassments and negative headlines for the company and CEO Mark Zuckerberg. Whistleblower Frances Haugen accused Facebook of ignoring potential harm to teen mental health. Global outage of all Facebook services on October 4th led to widespread mockery and frustration for users. Facebook is also caught in a tug of war over misinformation and concerns about censorship. Zuckerberg attempted to pivot by renaming the company Meta and focusing on a virtual metaverse, where apparently women or virtual women enter the metaverse and they are immediately gang raped. And this has not been so good for Zuckerberg's bank balance. But of course, when you tell that so and so is worth X billions, it doesn't really mean all that much, because they'd have to sell their shares first off. And if they start dumping shares, then the share price is going to tank. Plus, they have to pay capital gains tax on these sales. So they don't get to keep all of the money. But nevertheless, this is from Nicholas Vega at CNBC. Facebook co-founder Mark Zuckerberg saw his net worth decrease by almost $30 billion following the record-breaking plunge of Meta shares Thursday. With a current net worth of $84.3 billion, it is the first time the 37-year-old hasn't been one of the 10 richest people on Earth since summer 2015. Zuckerberg owns nearly 13% of Meta, which recently rebranded from Facebook. Zuckerberg's $29.8 billion loss is the second largest single-day loss in history, surpassed only by the $35 billion that the world's richest man, Elon Musk, lost in November after he tweeted about selling 10% of his Tesla stake. Musk also lost $25.8 billion from his network last week, Bloomberg reports. Meta's stock plummeted after the company warned of weaker than expected revenue growth in the next quarter and said that recent privacy changes from Apple will cost the company $10 billion. The 26% drop was Meta's biggest single-day plunge ever and wiped more than $200 billion off its market cap. And I saw a funny comment about this today. And where did it go? Hang on. I'll bring it up for you here. It's about algorithms. This is from, who is this from? Well, I hope I can find it soon enough. They're getting kind of embarrassing, actually. No, the joke was that, Facebook uses algorithms you should read this or you should read that. And, we want to keep you on Facebook more and more and more and more and all the time, right? Kaiser Sose tweeted, know where algorithmic enhancement happens to materially boost negative information streams trading. A beautiful day for karma. Watching Facebook get devoured 15 milliseconds at a time by soulless arbitrage trappers. Yes, it seems that there's not actually very many people in the stock market now. And Michael Lewis, in one of his books, he informed us about what traders call actual people in the markets. They call them Muppets. Golly, that doesn't sound very friendly, does it? I mean, it doesn't sound friendly to me. It makes it sound like these people are idiots and losers. One person who is pleased about this turn of events is Alex Berenson. He writes on his Substack, the corporate big tech censors are failing. Facebook shares are getting crushed today, down almost 25%. The company's value has fallen today by more than Boeing and General Motors are worth. Why? For the first time ever, the number of Facebook users is shrinking. The ridiculous rebranding to Meta platforms probably doesn't help. Apparently, deplatforming every person and group who has a non-woke thought isn't working out as well as Mark Zuckerberg had hoped. Meanwhile, things are going great at Twitter, too. And yes, like that. Twitter banned me, Berenson reports, on August the 28th. Since then, shares of the little bird have fallen almost 50%. Censorship isn't just un-American and contrary to the First Amendment and California and federal law. It's terrible for business, especially when this, from a blog post in February 2021, is your stated corporate reason for being. Quote, Twitter exists to empower voices to be heard, and we continue to make improvements to our service so that everyone, no matter their views or perspective, feels safe participating in the public conversation, unquote. Well, that's nonsense, obviously. Feels safe. Well, if people get to say what they like, no matter their views or perspective, some of this speech is going to make people feel unsafe, as safe is currently defined now, such as someone said something mean about me on social media, or someone attacked a deeply held opinion of mine on social media. I don't feel safe. Like those students at Georgetown. Berenson concludes, everyone, huh? Like those old movie theater ads for THX said, the audience is listening and they don't like what they're hearing. And let's go back to the chat. Okay, let's scroll up here. Tinder. Let's not talk about Tinder here. Zucker is gone. May he long stay gone. What? Did that happen? Or are you suggesting that he's going to be canned? See if there's anything on Drudge about this. The crash of Facebook. Zuck blames TikTok. Okay. Well, maybe he should have bought TikTok, like he bought Instagram. Because this was Microsoft did it, still does it. All these companies do it. Yeah, we have some competition here from a new idea. Let's just pay a ridiculous amount of money to take out the competition. Now it appears Zuck is still in the saddle. And back to the chat. A place to cry, says GC Stell. Pussification has doomed Western society. Mitch, not Mitchell, but Mitch, says Dr. Dead name. Indeed. Jim Smith says, and thus the essay by Norman Podhoretz entitled The Death of Neoconservatism, for neoconservatism was to be more. It was now conservatism. Yes, indeed. I remember that. I remember it well. I subscribed to commentary, I don't know, for about 20 years? And then, of course, when Podhoretz, it used to have people like Peter Brimlow would appear in commentary. Edward Luttwak would appear in commentary. When Podhoretz left, someone no one's heard of was appointed editor, and then I guess Pod Jr. needed a job or a better job, so he was installed in as editor. And commentary was a very useful high IQ magazine back in the day. It no longer is. Dr. Deadname says someone started a channel called The Crying Space. Let's see. Le Desperachisto says Lowitz should not engage in coded insults. Cato Boys didn't even back him up. Are we talking about that Kirshner fellow? Okay, it is, remember, it is COVID-free Thursday. Okay, the half Indian socialist won the election, says V. Who. I don't know to whom that refers. Emmett Kelly Zer said, I rather miss the government working with manufacturers in regard to protective tariffs. Yo Mama is not a fan of a democracy. I doubt Trump being arrested would spark a civil war, says Ann Run. David Rice says, maybe a total collapse of our economic system may start a civil war, but not much less. Emmett Kelly's Earth says, does he want Congress to pass a bill of attainder against Trump? That's a very good point, because a bill of attainders are illegal under the American Constitution. Of course, we've seen practical use of it. For instance, when Bobby Kennedy, when he was Attorney General, instructed the judiciary that they were going to get Roy Cohn. Didn't matter what for. They would just, they were going to put him in prison. And it didn't really matter how. And God knows they tried very hard for years. But they didn't. Okay. Let's see. Kevin's A Spark of Civil War Talk is his version of Kunslerian hopium, says Ann Run. Quetzalcoatl says, I think for Kunstler it is only a coda, but KMG believes in possibility. Well, look. Oh, let's throw Trump in prison for anything because we must, because he's going to, he'll claim that he was elected in 2024, but it's the result of a coup. And I mean, people have noticed what happened to the January 6th protesters or rioters, according to Taste. There was a riot on the streets of Washington, D.C., around the time of Trump's inauguration. And did any of those people go to prison? They would have been very short sentences. I think most of them got fines or weren't even prosecuted. Well, that was about the CNN guy, Kevin, says Anrun. Jeff Zucker, not Mark Zuckerberg. Emmett Kelly Zer says buying out competitors worked for Carnegie, but then again, his company produced value. Indeed. And we're going to move on to a different subject here. It's Black History Month in Canada because, of course, Black people are incidental to Canadian history. But according to the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, they would appear to have been essential right from the very beginning. And so they're just story after story after story about Black History Month. And is it celebrating the achievements of Blacks in Canada? Well, there's a little bit about that. But mostly it's about hate whitey. White people are awful. This is a story by E.M. Uzo Amaka, described as a 3-time published Barbadian-Canadian author, entrepreneur, parenting and lifestyle expert, and well-being facilitator. So what is it that you do? As a vegan enthusiast, she sits on the Queen Victoria Black Student Success Committee as their food and well-being coordinator. She, along with the group, are the recipients of the Urban Alliance 2021 Racial Justice Education Award. When she isn't facilitating, I'm not making this up, by the way. This is what it actually says. When she isn't facilitating, she can be found on Instagram, sharing healthy, family-friendly meals and treats. The impact of my child's teacher showing up to school in blackface. This past October, my 14-year-old daughter's teacher showed up to school in blackface for Halloween. Okay, whole class shocked and confused after teacher wears blackface to school. Student says. This is a CBC story from October 31st, 2021. Warning, this story contains images that may offend some readers. Okay. All right. This wasn't the first time she had experienced an incident like this, something like it happened at her previous school. Her former vice principal was sent a racist and threatening letter, which also named fellow Black teachers and parents. I ended up having to explain to my daughter why she was no longer seeing some of her teachers at school. She totally withdrew. Eventually, we sought out therapy to help her process everything. I don't know this woman's daughter, but this is a mistake. It has been my experience that people who have been exposed to therapy, psychologists, psychiatrists as young people, they don't turn out right. They don't turn out normal. At the time, she told me that it made her realize that as a Black person, her voice didn't matter. Yeah. This is why you have Prime Minister Trudeau yelling about it every day. This is why the CBC is devoting hundreds of thousands of words to Black Lives Matter. This is why we are told incessantly in this country about systemic racism, discrimination against Black people. But no, Black people's voices don't matter. No, they matter about 10, 20, or 50 times more than the voice of white people in my country. With this second incident, the mounting emotional labor was taking its toll. Oh, emotional labor. That is the most difficult form of labor. You know what emotional labor actually means? It means being alive. That's what it means. Many people in our school community were feeling the same, and to confront the incident head on, parents, students, and community members planned a rally. The goal was to present the Toronto District School Board with the list of demands to ensure safety and accountability and to show support for the children of the school who had to witness a teacher in blackface. I wonder if Justin Trudeau is going to be mentioned in this story. How many times has he been photographed wearing blackface? Half a dozen? 8? 10? My daughter was ready to attend, but on the morning of the rally, she changed her mind. I asked why, but wasn't prepared for her answer. Quote, because it's just the same old story every time. Nothing is ever going to change. Why are we even going there? Better question is, why are you and your daughter in my country? No one cares about how we feel, and if any of the teachers see us together, I won't feel comfortable at school after, unquote. In that moment, my heart sank. I reached for words to comfort and told her it was going to be okay. Then I looked down at the kitchen counter so she couldn't see the tears in my eyes. When I was left alone in the kitchen, I sat back and thought about what she had just said. As a Black woman, what happened on Halloween at my daughter's school was one of the many reminders that too often my lived experiences fall on deaf ears. Lived experiences. What other kind of experiences do people have than lived experiences? If you read a book, that is a lived experience, because the book is being appreciated by your consciousness, which is the only consciousness that we have. Everything that we say, everything that we do, everything that we think, everything consume, if you will, of culture is a lived experience. But these morons keep using the word as if it has some sort of magic power. She continues, as a Black parent, I have to protect myself and my children from an education system steeped in anti-Black racism. Now, this is obviously untrue. I was reading a story from the CBC, I believe yesterday, about a school in Strathcona School in Edmonton, where a year or so ago, a white students' alliance was formed and a meltdown occurred and the police were dragged in. Embedded within that system are what I call white lies. These are statements made to absolve people of any guilt. For example, pleading ignorance or passing blackface off as a costume not intended to offend. These are both examples of white lies that many Black parents have experienced at school. But this goes beyond education systems. They are found in systems meant to protect. Like when my young, too tall for his age son was placed in handcuffs after being a landed immigrant for just 1 week, and only because he fit a description. They crop up in the day-to-day, like when my daughter tells me that nobody cares about how she feels. They are the small but mighty lies people tell to feel comfortable. Meanwhile, it feels as though I'm supposed to shake these things off as meaningless, that they shouldn't affect me, but they always will, because they do not define me or my children, but they do seem to define you. They seem to be the only thing that defines you. And this goes on and on and on. Oh, microaggressions are real. Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. Fine. Again, life can be considered as a concatenation of microaggressions. My hope for Black History Month is that people can find the courage to speak up if they experience someone in blackface. Yeah. When does someone show up in blackface in Canada now before it doesn't become a huge story? But I also don't want anyone to feel discouraged because someone else can't understand or chooses to remain ignorant. For myself, I hope to stay courageous enough to speak my mind, to hold people accountable, and to share how negative stereotypes affect the Black community, including me and my family. Again, it can. I'm going to be blunt here, and I'm going to use a swear word. If Canada is such a horrible place, and has always been a horrible place, why did these people leave their shitholes to come here? Why would you go from a place where you were at home to a place which is apparently steeped in, based on white supremacy if you are not white? Why would you do that? Immigration, post-1967 immigration has been a disaster for Canada, an absolute disaster. Let's just leave aside the economic evidence, which is very strongly against immigration. But let's look at the social consequences. Canada was a peaceful country in 1967. It's not a peaceful country anymore. It's the war of all against all. Canada, unlike the United States in 1967, when our immigration policy was changed to reflect the 1965 change in the United States, Canada was free of racial animus. It certainly isn't now. And we have the increasing balkanization, and we have the increasing takeover of our politics by actors from other countries. We have politicking going on in all manner of languages, with various promises made to different ethnic groups in their languages, which sometimes the political parties don't even know about. And increasingly, let's have a Sikhs versus Chinese dispute in Vancouver. There are many such disputes in Vancouver and all over my country. And this is what happens when you decide that you are going to institute the Great Replacement. Of course, it's very good for the Liberal Party because these immigrants tend to look upon the Liberals as, Big Daddy. And it's very good for business because, of course, it puts Canadians out of work and lowers wages. But let's find out more about the CBC. CBC has a whole webpage called Being Black in Canada, Hamilton's Hidden Black History, the story of Rapid Ray Lewis. Okay. Oh, 1, 2, 3. Racism Past and Present, a panel discussion of Black community leaders in Amherst. A message from CBC's Executive Vice President, English Services on the Being Black in Canada project. South Shore School apologizes after using homework with racial stereotypes. Virtual conference draws Black scientists inspires university students. Oh, from CBC Arts. This month's logo celebrates Black love and the power of raising one another up. And a true queen mother, how Zab Mabungao paved the way for Black female dancers everywhere. Okay. And this is a story by Jamila Malika Abubakare, very Canadian name, how Black artists use situational art to build upon one another's legacies. Oh, and here's an installation mocking a, a motel sign. And it says, "There is no bad luck in the world but white folks," in neon. Yeah. This is by Situational Ethics. It says Toni Morrison. Okay. Was this a quotation from Toni Morrison? 2021 Jatovia by Jatovia Gary, courtesy of the Paula Cooper Gallery in New York. Black women scholars have been talking a lot lately about citation. I'm sure they have. Check out the Cite Black Women podcast, which aims to visibilize or make visible Black women's knowledge production, or read Queen's University professors Dr. Catherine McKittrick's poetic tweets that complicate a seemingly straightforward practice. But what about citation as art? Outside of academia, Black artists make creative use of citation to touch viewers who relate to the references. Black situational art is a kind of code that allows artists to speak in secret. Most works do not immediately identify the quotation. If you know, you know. Okay. And rubbish. Apparently, Jamila Malika Abu Bakare is an artist and writer currently working from Lenape lands. Oh, so this person came from Africa to move to territory which rightfully belongs to Native Indians. So this woman is a colonizer. She is accepting invitations to teach sound art, text art, and collage by Black artists. And let's talk about Black Lives Matter, which Justin Trudeau just loves. He loves it because it's a good organization. unlike others that he could speak of. I'm reminded that Lomez tweeted yesterday, BLM Antifa taking over section of Seattle ruled by a SoundCloud rapper warlord and descending into full-blown anarcho-tyranny with multiple homicides versus people turning Ottawa into a wholesome bloc party is about as clear a distinction between left and right as you'll get. And he had a follow-up to that. Worth noting that Chaz had the full backing of local authorities and also the governor and national media, whereas the people in Ottawa are considered by those same intellectual and moral betters a threat to democracy. This is from Andrew Kerr at the Washington Example. Black Lives Matter shut down all of its online fundraising streams late Wednesday, just days after California threatened to hold the charity's leaders personally liable over its lack of financial transparency. The move comes less than a week after the Washington Examiner investigation found that BLM has had no known leader in charge of its $60 million bankroll since its co-founder resigned in May. California and Washington recently ordered BLM to cease all fundraising activities in their blue states due to the failure of the BLM Global Network Foundation, the legal entity that represents the national BLM movement, to report information about its finances in 2020, the year it raised tens of millions amid the racial protests and riots that followed George Floyd's killing. We take these matters seriously and have taken immediate action, an unidentified spokesperson for the BLM GNF told the Washington Examiner. We have immediately engaged Compliance Council to address any issues related to state fundraising compliance. In the interim, we have shut down online fundraising as we work quickly to ensure we are meeting all compliance requirements. The donation button that used to be featured prominently on BLM's website was nowhere to be found as of Wednesday evening. The California Department of Justice told the Washington Examiner that BLM GNF is prohibited from soliciting donations so long as its status is listed as a delinquent. Indiana Attorney General Todd Rokita previously said BLM's refusal to answer basic questions about its finances and operations fits a common and disturbing pattern. Then, of course, we have this mansion in Toronto, which was purchased by BLM for some unknown reason. It's funny how things work. Life is full of surprises, I like to say. BLM was, finished after that supporter in Dallas, killed 5 cops? Finished. Then a lifeline criminal and thug breaks some minor law, resists arrest, ends up dead in police custody, and America goes up in flames, and there's a lot of, 5-finger discounts, millions and millions of them, and Black Lives Matter is back on track. And racism. Yeah, we never hear anything about racism because, of course, it's white people who run everything, and we have white supremacy, such like. But no, actually, that's not true. We just never hear the end of it. This is from Joel Pollack at Breitbart. The Anti-Defamation League, a once respected civil rights organization that has joined the activist left, appeared to change its definition of racism on Wednesday after Breitbart News and others pointed out an earlier anti-white change. As Breitbart's Alan Bakari reported Monday, the ADL's definition of racism used to be fairly straightforward, unquote. Racism is the belief that a particular race is superior or inferior to another, that a person's social and moral traits are predetermined by his or her inborn biological characteristics. Racial separatism is the belief, most of the time based on racism, that different races should remain segregated and apart from one another, unquote. By late 2020, under the influence of BLM, which the ADL was desperate to appease, to the point of joining anti-Semitic left-wing groups and calling for a Black-led movement, the organization changed the definition to, quote, the marginalization and or oppression of people of color based on a socially constructed racial hierarchy that privileges white people, unquote. Yes. By definition now, only white people can be racists, Only white people can be racists. By Wednesday, the definition appeared to have changed again to a new interim definition of racism. Quote, racism occurs when individuals or institutions show more favorable evaluation or treatment of an individual or group based on race or ethnicity, unquote. Okay. So preferring your own people to strangers then is racism. Okay. Because that's a very broad statement we just heard. The ADL cited Harvard professor Robert Livingston, a social psychologist who is also a diversity consultant. In a separate essay published Wednesday at Medium, ADL CEO Jonathan Greenblatt said, quote, a few years ago, ADL updated our definition to reflect that racism in the United States manifests in broader and systemic ways, and to explicitly acknowledge the targeting of people of color, among many others, by the white supremacist extremism we have tracked for decades. Well, this is true. This new frame narrowed the meaning in other ways, and by being so narrow, the resulting definition was incomplete, rendering it ineffective and therefore unacceptable. It's true, it's just not the whole truth. It alienated many people who did not see their own experience encompassed in this definition, including many in the Jewish community, unquote. Last week, as Breitbart News noted, the ADL gave fellowships of up to $25,000 to Jews of color. Judaism does not recognize distinctions of color in any way. The term Jews of color simply excludes white Jews of European origin. The whole purpose of the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith, is to fight for Jewish interests. But apparently that's not enough for them. Apparently they have to stand watch over the whole world and everyone in it. There's a fellow called Robert Stark, who has a Substack. He posted a piece a day ago called "The Radical Center's Psychosocial Approach to Race Relations." The Webster Dictionary defines racism as, quote, a belief that race is a fundamental determinant of human traits and capacities, and that racial differences produce an inherent superiority of a particular race, unquote. Really? The term racism did not enter the vernacular until the early 20th century and has since evolved from simply hating other races to believing that certain groups have inborn superior traits, to further evolving to adapt to the Great Awakening with a new definition of racism as a socially constructed system that maintains white privilege. Thus, racism is treated as a secular sin and moral transgression. The debate over race politics is one of the most divisive and emotionally charged issues, relying upon a hyper-moralistic good versus evil narrative. This is quite a long essay, and it touches upon atavism, I suppose you could say. The debate over race as a social construct and racism as a moral transgression ignores biological motives for tribalism. Man's inborn tribal instincts are clear, even if not exclusively racial. A sense of us versus them is ingrained in the human psyche, as Carl Schmitt's friend-enemy distinction is the psychological basis for politics. Even if it may be morally unfair, as there are decent sides of both sides of a particular conflict, it is an inherent reality of human nature that is hard to change with social engineering. There's a lot of what I agree with in this essay. I'll just repeat something that I've said before, that when one powerful side declares war on you, you can fight back or be defeated. I mean, there's no other alternatives. And for 30 years now or so, the progressives have been carrying out war against white people. Of course, going back to the 1960s, Susan Sontag infamously said that the white race is the cancer of human history. Of course, she was white herself, although being Jewish, perhaps she did not recognize it. It is simply impossible to read almost anything, to go a day or less than that without being informed that white people are a unique evil, and that sneaky white people, for all their pandering to woke sentiments, you just scratch the surface and you get Hitler. This is not a charge which can be ignored. It must be fought back against. Otherwise, the consequences would be catastrophic. Let's go back to Joseph Tainter and his Collapse of Complex Societies from 1988. Chapter, The Study of Collapse. The Roman Empire. Interpretations of conflict and mismanagement abound in Roman studies and can be traced to the later empire itself. Ammianus Marcellinus, for example, attributed Roman decadence to growth of the bureaucracy and to excessive taxation. Gibbon, although he cited a number of causes for the Roman collapse in his classic work, Christianity, Decline of Martial Spirit, Ignorance of Dangers, indicted poor leadership as frequently as any other factor. Frank ascribed the Roman failure to lack of vision on the part of the landed gentry, the willingness during the Republic to betray the peasantry for large slave estates, and to accept the monarchy for personal safety. Caldwell indicted soil impoverishment by large estates and the general demoralization of the exploited class. Boak and Sinnigan single out the fact that, quote, Rome failed to develop an economic system that could give to the working classes of the empire living conditions sufficiently advantageous to encourage them to support it devotedly and to reproduce in adequate numbers, unquote. Dill also cited the economic weakness of the Roman class system, but believed that collapse was due to the ruin of the middle class and of the municipalities. Child noted a contradiction of Hellenistic and Roman economy, the lack of adequate development or extension of productive forces, leaving the peasantry static or declining. The resulting low standard of living restricted internal markets, and when the economy could no longer grow by spatial expansion, it began to decline. I'll just break in to say that this is my view, that the Roman Empire, it was based on robbery. We are now taking over your nation. It's ours now, and we are going to strip it for our benefit. And eventually, well, they reached the Atlantic Ocean, and then they reached Persia, and there was no more room to grow. The limits of Roman expansion in Germany were reached in the early first century AD. By AD 250, prosperity was gone and the empire was economically dead. Isaac suggested that multiple factors were responsible for the empire's demise, but like Gibbon, he seemed regularly to focus on poor management. West cited a number of factors he believed were responsible for the collapse of the empire. Most are economic in nature, but seem to involve mismanagement: A, slavery; B, introduction of barbarians into the empire; C, waste of precious metals and capital in domestic luxuries; D, export of precious metals to pay for imported luxuries; E, increasing state authoritarianism; and F, increasing taxation and expenditures. Brown suggests a novel idea, that the senatorial aristocracy and the Catholic Church in the West had disassociated themselves from the army and unwittingly sapped its strength. See Northcote Parkinson, true to the theme of his other writings, blamed over taxation. In one of the fundamental works of Marxist theory, Engels singled out Roman exploitation of the provinces as bringing on impoverishment, declines in commerce and population, the decay of towns, and lower agricultural activity. Rostovtsev developed one of the most unusual class conflict explanations, especially of the crisis of the 3rd century AD. The peasant army, to Rostovtsev, was resentful of the privileged in cities. The power of the military led to increased pay and ruinous costs under the Severan dynasty of the early 3rd century AD. These emperors militarized the government, staffed it with peasants, and eliminated the traditional upper classes from the army and the administration. Civil strife between military contenders weakened defenses and allowed barbarian incursions. This in turn led to the regimentation of the population and the rigid system of Diocletian and Constantine. There came to be little inducement to betterment, for then one would merely be forced to work for the state. When the state was threatened, it named itself the prime economic beneficiary. A different interpretation of the role of the military has been offered by writers who blame decline on the end of compulsory service and consequent employment of barbarians. An alternative class conflict view has been offered by St. Croix, who believes that the wealthy classes depressed the political and legal status of almost all others to the slave level. Many were exploited for the benefit of a few, and increasingly so through time. Conflicts and tensions between classes amounted to societal contradictions. By the Severan period, the legal rights of the poorer classes were practically gone. With nothing to restrain the greed and ambition of the propertied class except the emperor, the support base for the empire was ruined. Toynbee's views were along similar lines, though not so overstated, and relied on a different mechanism. Toynbee argued that the destruction of the Italian countryside and peasantry during the Hannibalic War led to decline of subsistence production and the formation of large estates producing for market sale. The subsequent expansion of Rome brought ruin to the peasantry, power, and wealth to the elites. A professional army replaced that formerly composed of peasants. The consequences overall were far-reaching and condemned the Roman Empire in advance to be short-lived. I'll have more from Toynbee, from Tainter tomorrow when he will discuss theories about the collapse of the Byzantine Empire. And let's go back to the chat. Here we go. Strange question from Burton Sultanoff. Have you ever been concussed? Asked Anrun. If not, it sounds like one and or worse might be heading your way. Oh, dear. Now. Quachalango says, keep that stuff to Irish pubs. Dionysus said, I actively look for a fist fight. I'm in control now. Alexander Haig, Don Willis reminds us of this. Yes, I remember seeing this live on TV. And his political career, or his would-be political career, was just destroyed. He was pretty much shaking in terror as he said this. Quachalango says, I know the things they will do to get control versus I know what they will do once they have control. Dionysus loves BAP. I've been in this chat for 30 minutes. Nobody has an uplifting, encouraging word. Pleads Don Willis. Okay. You're not going to find any Hitler defense from me. Not now, not ever. The biggest loser in world history. Robert Stark asks, this isn't the same one who used to do an alt-rightish podcast, is it? I wasn't familiar with this until yesterday, until he sent me a link to his essay. British American says, what's Purpa drank? Like grape soda? No, it's some drink and you put candy in it. Skittles. You remember the fellow who was limited by George Zimmerman, Trayvon Martin? The supposition was that he was going to create Purpa drink. That's why he bought Skittles at the convenience store. I think cough syrup is involved as well. A Desperate Chisto says, in Austin, the trains run on time, but there are no riders. Never, ever. Okay. So let's talk about Ukraine, which is now apparently it's displaced Israel as America and Canada's closest ally. Of course, very few Americans or Canadians could find it on a map, but never mind that. This is from CaitlinJohnston.com. MSM pundits push idea that criticizing U.S. policy makes you a Russian agent. And here's a Humpty, Brian Stelter, on CNN. Why is Tucker Carlson so popular on Russian TV? One thing I've been meaning to write about these last few days has been the way mass media pundits have been insinuating or outright asserting that Fox News host Tucker Carlson is literally an agent of the Russian government. Carlson has been accused of promoting Russian propaganda by mainstream narrative managers for frequently criticizing the Biden administration's hawkish posture toward Russia regarding the entirely unsubstantiated claim that Moscow was preparing to launch an unprovoked military invasion of Ukraine. We've been seeing things like Anderson Cooper innocently musing that it is striking how neatly Kremlin propaganda seems to dovetail with Carlson's talking points. And this CNN segment from December with reliable sources host Brian Stelter and tinfoil hat Russiagator Julia Jaffe Is that woman still around? Wondering aloud why Russian state media seem to be so fond of Carlson. By mid-January, Democratic Party operatives were openly demanding that Carlson be investigated for violations of the Foreign Agents Registration Act, because it's Russia that wields so much influence in the United States. Not Israel, not China, not Mexico, but Russia. Sometimes, I go back and forth on this. Sometimes I think these people can't possibly believe this. And sometimes I think that these people are so devoted to falsehood, so black-hearted that they actually do believe it. Someone called Alexandra Chalupa, and who's she when she's at home? Defender of truth, lawyer, human rights hobbyist. That's not a thing. From California, lives in DC, grateful to be on this journey with someone, and mom to our girls. #we movement. Oh, okay. Person sounds like a rent seeker. She tweeted, "This isn't journalism. It's an ongoing FARA violation. Tucker Carlson needs to be prosecuted as an unregistered agent of the Russian Federation and treason under Article 3, Section 3, Clause 1 of the U.S. Constitution for aiding an enemy in hybrid warfare against the United States." Since when is Russia America's enemy? Is America in a state of war with Russia? No, it is not. I was talking about civil war earlier. Apparently, this Alexandra Chalupa is a woman of some stature. She is calling for Tucker Carlson to be destroyed, to be tried for treason, because she does not like his anti-war position vis-a-vis the Ukraine. The accusations and insinuations increased, eventually leading to Carlson outright denying being a Russian agent in a recent interview with the New York Times, saying, quote, "I've never been to Russia. I don't speak Russian, of course. I'm not an agent of Russia," unquote. As you would expect, this denial was then spun by the same demented mainstream pundits who spent the last 5 years being wrong about Russia as evidence that Carlson is a Russian agent. Tucker Carlson told the New York Times he's not a Russian agent amid controversy over his pro-Kremlin stance, blares a headline in Business Insider. Would a Russian agent say if asked if they were a Russian agent? Tweeted former FBI special agent Clint Watts. Tucker Carlson denies being a Russian agent after taking Kremlin's side, says a viral tweet by former FBI Assistant Director Frank Figliuzzi. The Federal Bureau of Investigation. Are they all woke idiots there now? Because the more I hear about the FBI, it seems ever clearer, that the FBI is an enemy of the United States of America. Narrator, after he helped destroy American democracy, it turned out he was indeed a Russian agent, though a rather silly one, added MSNBC's cartoonish intelligence expert, Malcolm Nance. Nicole Wallace, of course, she never fails to come through. Tucker Carlson is walking proof that you don't need to be an agent to be a useful idiot. So this was former FBI agent Peter Strzok told MSNBC's Nicole Wallace. Why is this person? Why would he be invited onto TV? Why hasn't Tucker Carlson registered as a foreign agent? Reads a viral tweet from the notorious Lincoln Project. Okay. There are Reds under the bed. Again. Of course, as I never tire of pointing out, the Soviet Union was formally dissolved in 1991. And a good chunk of Soviet territory was surrendered. It was surrendered. But no, it's the commies are still in charge. Yeah, and you people were pro-commie back then, but you've forgotten that. This is from Dave DeCamp at antiwar.com. On Wednesday, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki, not Jennifer, but Jen Psaki, accused Senator Josh Hawley, Republican of Missouri, of parroting Russian talking points after he sent a letter to Secretary of State Antony Blinken calling for the Biden administration to drop support for Ukraine's potential NATO membership. If you are digesting Russian misinformation and parroting Russian talking points, you are not aligned with longstanding bipartisan American values, which is to stand up for the sovereignty of countries like Ukraine, but others Psaki told reporters at a press briefing. That applies to Senator Hawley, but it applies to others who may be parroting the talking points of Russian propagandist leaders. Since Hawley is no dove, he responded by accusing the Biden administration of coddling Russia. One of his examples was Biden so-called giving Moscow the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, even though a pipeline that runs from Germany to Russia isn't Washington's to give. And, let's talk about America's newfound greatest ally. This is by Ted Snyder at antiwar.com. This is really kind of embarrassing for the Ukraine. Neo-Nazis. A different kind of hypocrisy was revealed in an unlikely way recently. People in Canada were joined by protesters. Whether you agree with them or not is not relevant to Ukraine. What becomes relevant is that the Canadian media and government were at pains to discredit the protests by painting them as violent, even though there was no violence, and as of now, no arrests related to violence. The Canadian media even ran headlines saying that just because there was no violence at a protest doesn't make it peaceful. To support the claim of violence, they entered into evidence a protester jumping on the tomb of the unknown soldier and the placing of an anti-vaccine sign in the hands of a Terry Fox statue. Hardly violence even in Canada. They also cited individuals with swastikas in the crowd. That they were right to condemn. There should be no tolerance for neo-Nazis or Nazi sympathizers anywhere. However, the neighboring headline was about Canada's increased support for the government of the Ukraine, a government that for the past several years has been openly collaborating and sympathizing with neo-Nazis. And there's a hypocrisy. They discredit the protest by saying they don't support neo-Nazis, but offer unquestioning support to a Ukrainian government that cooperates with neo-Nazis. In a recent article, Anatol Levin pointed out that many of the soldiers who have fought on the Ukrainian side in the separatist battles in the Donbass have been so-called ultra-nationalist militias that have neo-Nazi connections. What is the government of Ukraine's position on these neo-Nazi militias? The most famous of them, the Azov Battalion, has been officially incorporated into the Ukrainian National Guard. Stephen Cohen, who is Professor Emeritus of Russian Studies and Politics at Princeton, in an article on Ukraine called America's Collusion with Neo-Nazis, said that the snipers who killed protesters in Kiev's Maidan Square and triggered the 2014 coup d'etat were almost certainly sent by the neo-fascist organization Right Sector. He says that the coup government in Ukraine has systematically rehabilitated and memorialized Ukrainian Nazi Germany collaborators. According to Richard Sakwa and Frontline Ukraine, several core ministerial positions in the Ukrainian coup government were taken by the Right Sector and Svoboda parties, including top national security, defense, and legal posts. Both Right Sector and Svoboda are openly neo-Nazi parties. The Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Justice were both members of Svoboda. Andriy Parabi, one of the founders of Svoboda, with what Sakwa calls a long history of ultra-nationalist activism, became Secretary of the National Security Defense Council. Sakwa calls Parabi's appointment astonishing. Neo-Nazis played a leading role in the 2014 protests and coup. Among the Nazi collaborators memorialized by the government of Ukraine is Stepan Bandera, who allied with the Nazis and committed atrocities against Jews, Poles, and Russians. Sakwa reports that a giant portrait of Bandera was on the stage during the Maidan protests. This is hypocrisy of a different type since it's not about a Russian invasion. But it's surely hypocritical that the U.S. installed a coup government in the Ukraine that collaborates with neo-Nazis and that the U.S. and Canada unquestioningly support that government while claiming to never support neo-Nazis and Nazi sympathizers. If there is a war in the Ukraine, can we call this the war for Hunter Biden? I think we might. This is from Trent Baker at Breitbart. Breitbart News senior contributor Peter Schweitzer, author of Red-Handed, How American Elites Get Rich Helping China Win, reacted to the New York Times suing the State Department for access to Hunter Biden's emails. He told Fox's Fox and Friends that the media's turn on Biden and his family's overseas dealings is an important development. He added the media see Biden is struggling as president and know he is likely on his way out. Isn't it funny? Oh, we need even more sanctions against Russia because they're such meanies. How about China? No, no, no. We have to suck up to China. We can't say things that embarrass them, especially if you're in sports. Why is this? Because there are Americans getting rich by dealing with what is possibly the nastiest regime in the world. There are very few Americans getting rich by dealing with Russia. It's as simple as that. China is a far, far nastier country than Russia is. But that doesn't matter because we have decided, because, oh, yeah, weren't we always at war with those guys? That now they represent a unique threat to the world. And this is from Just the News. In an email kept from public view for more than 5 years, a top U.S. State Department official in Kiev wrote to Washington superiors at the end of the Obama-Biden administration that Hunter Biden's business dealings in Ukraine, quote, undercut, unquote, U.S. efforts to fight corruption in the former Soviet Republic. The email was written on November 22nd, 2016 by former U.S. Embassy official George Kent, one of the Democrats' star witnesses in their first effort to impeach Donald Trump. It was classified confidential, the lowest level of secrecy, by then U.S. Ambassador to Kiev, Marie Yovanovitch, another of the Democrats' impeachment witnesses, and was not produced as evidence to House lawmakers during impeachment. Contrary to federal law, the State Department failed to acknowledge the existence of the document to the court or to Just the News in its multiple FOIA lawsuits against the State Department seeking records on Hunter and Joe Biden's dealings in Ukraine. Now, I should mention that the New York Post came up with a sensational story about Hunter Biden and his dealings with the Ukraine and China, with allegations of kickbacks to Big Daddy Joe Biden, and the rest of the media pretended that this story didn't exist. Oh, that it was Russian disinformation. If this story had been treated by the rest of the media as it should have been, would Joe Biden have been elected, even in the manner that he was? I don't know. I say certainly be up in the air. But now I suspect that Schweitzer is right, that the fact that the New York Times is showing some interest in this means that they have decided that they're going to turn on him, that he has to be ousted. The fear being that if he's not ousted, the Democrats are going to lose the presidency, the House, and the Senate, and that the Republicans would have, such power that they'd be able to ram through any legislation. This is from Angelica Stabile at Fox News. Hunter Biden's debauchery. Judge Janine taps into a life of sex, drugs, and foreign funding. This is part 2 of a Fox Nation special, Who is Hunter Biden? And of course, there are many, many copies of the hard drive in Hunter Biden's laptop extent. The FBI doesn't seem particularly interested in the laptop, but of course, the FBI, as previously mentioned, does not seem to be particularly friendly to the American people. Doesn't seem to be particularly friendly at all to the American people. I'm going to move on to Theater Thursday shortly. But there's a couple of stories that I wanted to mention before that. They're both from Summit News. Germany's CDU considers dropping Christian from its name to appeal to a more diverse demographic. This is by Paul Joseph Watson. There has been nothing Christian about the Christian Democratic Union in Germany for years and years and years. The party, which was in power for 16 years before last year's election, is worried that the word is preventing it from attracting non-Christian members. This is based on concerns surrounding a decline of trust in the church as well as the Catholic pedophile scandal. Such a move would not be unprecedented in Europe, given that the Christian Democratic People's Party in Switzerland rebranded itself to be Die Mitte, or the Central. If the CDU were to go through with such a move, for many conservatives, it would represent one step further to the left for a party that has become increasingly less conservative and which has even attacked parties such as Hungary's Fidesz that profess to be defenders of the Christian faith in Europe, reports Remix News. Indeed, given that the CDU produced Angela Merkel, who opened Germany's borders to a migrant onslaught from North Africa and the Middle East, they can hardly even be considered Christian anymore. While the Christian Democrats want to eschew the word Christian, others want to get away from the word Germany itself. As Summit News highlighted last year, members of the German Green Party loathe their own country to such a degree, 300 of them petitioned for the word Germany to be removed from their own manifesto. And I guess there's two ways of playing politics. There's a smart way and there's a stupid way. And the smart way is to reward your friends and to punish your enemies. Again, Carl Schmitt's friend-enemy distinction, the basis of politics. This is from the same source. French presidential candidate Eric Zemmour says he'll give parents in rural areas of the country 10,000 euros for each new child they have. The goal is to raise birth rates amongst the French and take back the countryside. That's a very, very good idea as well. And we see similar natalist policy in Hungary. I suppose that's one of the reasons why Viktor Orban is hated so much. I mean, white people aren't supposed to have children. Each act of childbirth, when a white woman gives birth, it's an act of evil because, history, the arc of history is trending towards what? The elimination of white people. Well, certainly, supplanting them, not just in colonial foundations such as Canada, the United States, Australia, and New Zealand, but in the countries that are indigenous, such as Ireland, Scotland, England, Wales, France, Germany, etc., etc. Yeah, you heard of the green energy revolution, how that's going to make everyone happier and the world a better place. Well, part of this is that we can't use coal anymore because coal is just so foul, despite the fact that we have shredders, we have devices, filters, which, stop the pollution from being released. And what's the result of this? The explosion in the cost of energy. Electricity for your house, heating for your house, to the extent now that this is likely to become a serious crisis, that people are going to lose their homes from a combination of increasing rents due to, of course, immigrants and to increasing heating costs. And I'll just mention briefly a story from the Daily Mail by Ross Clark. You are £2,951 worse off thanks to post-COVID cost of living crisis. How Black Thursday increase to energy cap and interest rates adds to inflation that is making millions of Brits poorer. Britain suffered a double whammy of large increases in the cost of living today, with the energy price cap soaring by nearly £700 and interest rates going up to 0.5% in their second rise in just 7 weeks. National insurance is set to increase by 1.25 percentage points in April. Petrol prices are up by more than a quarter in the year, and council tax is expected to rise by an average of 3% for the forthcoming year. An average household will spend £139 a year more on food in 2022. Clothing and footwear costs are up by an extra £51 a year, while families will spend an extra £136 on household goods due to soaring inflation. As today, this was dubbed Black Thursday by analysts due to the multiple prices. Well, I suppose there's going to be some sort of just pro forma effort. Oh, yes, all of this money, that we've borrowed or created because of the self-inflicted wound that I'm not going to talk about today. Well, it's got to be paid. And where's that money going to come from? Well, there has to be an increase in taxes and tariffs on people. And the destruction of energy resources because of a preposterous belief that the world is coming to an end if it gets a little warmer, that that we actually have anything to do with that is something that we can control, is once again another example of the experts being wrong about everything always. It's as if, when given a choice of any number of possibilities, they always and deliberately choose the stupidest one, which is going to have the worst possible consequences for the greatest number of people. So, Theater Thursday, the film today is from 1980, and it's called Foxes, and it is directed by Adrian Lyne. Now, one might get the impression, if you've ever heard about this film, or you've seen the poster art, that it is a teenage exploitation movie. It is very much not a teenage exploitation film. Yes, indeed, it is about a group of 4 16-year-old girls who are in various degrees attractive, even sexy. But it's a really serious examination of the problems of these girls. Also, an examination of their friendship and family relations, such as they are. Lyne is an Englishman who was born in 1941, and he was part of the British invasion of the 1990s. The British are coming, famous line from the time. And he was in commercials, TV commercials. I was speaking about this, last week? Dominic Sandbrook's depiction of the Great British Dream Machine, that British commercials were acknowledged to be the best in the world because you had 30 seconds and there weren't as many commercials on British TV as on American TV. And of course, the BBC has no commercials, so you better make your 30 seconds count. Some of the others who were in the ad industry who went on to become major forces in Hollywood were, of course, Ridley Scott, his brother Tony Scott, Alan Parker, and Hugh Hudson. So I was reading a story from The Guardian, an old story from 2007, and Adrian Lyne had a very interesting thing to say about how his career might have turned out differently. I remember making this ad up in Yorkshire when I got a message that Stanley Kubrick had called, said Lyne. He'd seen an ad I'd made for milk in which I'd used a particular type of graduated filter. He wanted to know exactly what filter I'd used. I rang him back from a phone box, my hands shaking. He ended up offering me the role of second unit director on Barry Lyndon. I should have done it, but I didn't. I thought that if I'd done a good job, he'd get the credit, and if I did a bad job, I'd get the blame. Yeah, there's something to that, actually. But of course, one of the problems was working with Stanley Kubrick was that if you did a good job, he never wanted to let you go. And he used all of his powers of manipulation to keep people working for him. Also, if you worked for Stanley Kubrick, you found yourself doing a lot of many different things. You're a smart guy. You can figure this out. This is pretty much the way that Kubrick always put it. Now, Adrian Lyne became one of the biggest directors in Hollywood with a series of 3 movies in the 1980s, Flashdance, 9.5 Weeks, and then Fatal Attraction. You know, the one about the bunny boiler? All 3 of these films are dreadful. They're just, I suppose Fatal Attraction, you could call this to be a penny dreadful. Michael Douglas doesn't get a clue right from the very beginning that Glenn Close is out of her mind and dangerous. That just slips past him. Really? A man of his years and experience. And of course, Flashdance, which is based on a script by Joe Esterhazy, who is a schlock merchant. It's based on a ridiculous notion that you got a bunch of factory workers, and they want to get drunk and enjoy themselves after work. And instead of going to the bars where naked women, appear, they're going to go to a bar where a woman who isn't naked does artistic things, because of course that's what they would do. 9.5 Weeks with Kim Basinger and Mickey Rourke. Yes, introduced the world to the idea that it would be something that one would want to consider to have sexual intercourse on concrete stairwells outdoors. I don't really think that is advised. And Adrian Lyne had another huge hit in 1993 with a movie called Indecent Proposal, which actually, that phrase entered popular speech. When I first heard of this film, I was reminded of a joke, a well-known joke, which you may have heard of. And it goes like this. A man goes up to an attractive woman and says, "Would you have sex with me for $100? No, what? Would you have sex with me with $1 million? Yeah. And, the joke is that the woman is a whore. It's just a question of price. But it was a huge, huge hit. It's stupid movie. Lyne made a remake, of Kubrick's Lolita, closer to the book, which was a mistake, which was a big mistake to be closer to the book. Because the book is particularly, put up on the screen that Humbert is a despicable criminal. Whereas Kubrick's version of him, it's possible to see him, particularly in James Mason's fine performance, as a man who has been brought down by a mistake, a tragedy, if you will. Lyne made a film called Unfaithful in 2002, an erotic thriller, and then he went 20 years without making a movie. Really strange. He has a movie supposedly being released this year called Deep Water. Ooh, it is again erotic. It's got Ben Affleck in it. Ooh, Ben Affleck. Does Ben Affleck really want to do a sexy movie? He's tried that in the past, and it has not worked. It has not worked at all. But back to Foxes. Now, you may find this laughable, and I'm about to say that this film reminded me quite a bit of the films about young people made by the great French director Éric Rohmer. And I rewatched this movie, and I thought the script must have been written by a woman, because it's about 4 women. There are male characters, but they're peripheral characters. This is a story about women, which is very sympathetic to their problems. It turns out it was written by a man called Gerald Ayres, but I discovered that what he did was he interviewed quite a few high school girls about their lives. And this is what Éric Rohmer did for many of his films, is that he would interview the cast members and ask them about their lives, hopes, dreams, etc., and that he would fashion this into a script which would be best suited for the people that he had chosen to be in his films. The music is by Giorgio Moroder. I can't say that it's one of his best movie scores, but I don't know that Moroder is really kind of suited for this kind of movie, which is it's a series of vignettes, really, about, again, the lives of 4 16-year-old girls. And it's not, nothing like, Midnight Express or anything like that. The cinematography by Michael Sarandon, I really have to applaud him in Lyne's the use, of light. One becomes, inured to overlit movies or underlit movies, or particularly now, everything is going to look blue-gray, that sort of thing. The movie appears to have been shot entirely with available light. Now, I'm almost certain that is the case. That is not the case, but it looks as if it is. And for much of the movie, the available light is the light of the sun. James Wong Howe, the great cinematographer, famously said that you always have to show your light source. And Line and his DP, they do this. And as a result, what we get, the visuals that we get, are very realistic looking, which I suppose contributes to the kind of semi-documentary feeling of Foxes. The movie stars Jodie Foster, a taxi driver of fame. She's a 16-year-old, and she's playing. She was 18 years old. No, she would have been about 17 years old when she played this role, playing a 16-year-old. She is very good in it, very good indeed. Now, you could say the girls, that they are stereotypical. Jeannie, played by Jodie Foster, she's the sensible one. And Annie Malik, played by Sherry Curry, she is the drug head. Okay. Madge Axman, who's played by Marilyn Kagan, she is the slump. And Deirdre Tompkins, played by Candace Stroh, she is the slut. Yeah, it's all true, I suppose, but these are very nuanced portraits that we get both in the writing and in the acting. And I should point out that 3 out of the 4 families depicted in this have been, well, wrecked by divorce. It's a curious thing in American society, and I don't know exactly when this started. Perhaps sometime I would say sometime in the 1970s, that it just became quietly accepted that by the time children reach the age of puberty, they're out of their parents' hair, or their parents don't have the willingness or feel that they don't have the right to guide their lives anymore, that they are socialized by their peers, and then increasingly, by the media, and now social media, not socialized by their parents or their family members. This is some critics have compared this movie to an after-school special. I think this is quite unfair. There are certain didactic messages one can take from this film, such as divorce is bad for children and don't take drugs, kids. But we are not beat over the head with this. Oh, okay. Laura Dern is in this film, and she was quite young when she made the film, and it's only on my third viewing that, okay, that was Laura Dern. So, yeah, now I recognize her. Robert Romanus is in this film. I always confuse him with his brother, what's his name, Richard. He plays a jerk in this film, just as he does in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which came out 2 years later. We have the wonderful great American character actress Lois Smith, who plays Madge's mother. Randy Quaid plays an unlikely boyfriend. The lovely Sally Kellerman plays Mary, Jeannie's mother. Sally Kellerman's character had been married to Adam Faith's character, who plays the manager or co-manager of a rock group called Angel, and perhaps others. Adam Faith, of course, was a big pop star in Britain in the 1960s, and later became an actor. And he was in 2 movies about, hang on, let me check here. Yeah, he was in Stardust, which is a movie about rock music, and it's a sequel to That'll Be the Day, which is also about rock music. Faith, I've seen Faith in many things on TV, particularly the show which ran on British TV from 1971 to 72 called Budgie. He's really quite good in that. We have Scott Baio, who plays a friend of the girls. He has sexual designs on all of them at one point, or in one hilarious scene. He asks the girls one after the other whether they will have sex with them that night, and they laugh at him because he's a runt. And he plays a rather deep character in this, unlike, say, the obnoxious jerk he played in Happy Days, the obnoxious jerk he played in Joni Loves Chachi, and the obnoxious jerk he played in Charles in Charge. One watches this movie and, golly, it appears that Scott Baio can act. Sherry Curry appears in this movie with a tattoo, a small tattoo of a cherry with a stem. I don't know whether that's a real tattoo or not, but of course, Sherry Curry was the lead singer of a notorious band, jailbait band called The Runaways. And there's been a movie about this, the Runaways movie, which has to tone down the influence of their Svengali and producer. What's his name? Kim Fowley, one of the great bad men in rock and roll history. Just evil, I would say. But in the movie, the actor who played him, this is an Oscar-winning performance, actually, but they don't give Oscars for that sort of thing. Sherry Curry is good in this. Now, she is playing a wild girl who is frequently out of her mind on drugs and alcohol, who is seemingly, I've coined this phrase, it's mine, okay, you didn't hear it anywhere else. She is a douche-seeking missile. Who is the worst man in any group of men? That's the man I want. That's her. That's the way she goes through life. We see, I suppose, sisterly solidarity in this movie, a big theme, because she would probably have been dead, if not for the intervention of Jeannie, Jodie Foster's character. The other two girls, well, they like her, but her behavior is so impossible that one would need almost infinite reserves of patience to put up with this girl who is on probation for some crime. We're never told what the crime is. Her father is a cop and a brutal, stupid man who smacks her about and wants to put her in an asylum. And her mother, after their divorce, has seemingly retreated into a world of silence and darkness. Sally Kellerman's character, she was married to Adam Faith's character, and she didn't take the divorce very well. She's on drugs, presumably antidepressants. They don't seem to be working very well. She is whiny, exceedingly whiny. Again, very bad taste in men. And she's Sally Kellerman. I know she's 40 years old, but she's Sally Kellerman. My word, she could get a much better man than the man that we see her with in the movie. But I guess she didn't want a good man or a man of any kind of stature, because that might require her to, I don't know, measure up in some way. So we have the kind of thing that you would associate with 16-year-old girls. There's a wonderful tracking shot right at the very beginning of the movie where we see this room in which all four of the girls are sleeping. It is a room in Mary's house, Jeannie's mother, and because of the troubles that they have with their family, they all decide to huddle for comfort and support in a single room in Jeannie's house. And so this tracking shot, we see a tube of Clearasil, we see nail polish, underarm deodorant, a poster of John Travolta, Kiss poster, all of the detritus that one would associate with adolescent female life. And the set decoration, the set design in this movie is just outstanding. Again, this all of the rooms that we see seemed lived in. And teenage girls are typically messy. And, every time we see them, they're messy, 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 messy. So as for the plot, there's not really a plot. As I say, it's a series of vignettes. And, well, Cherie Currie's character begins the film on the run from her father because he wants to put her in an asylum. And we see her on the streets of Los Angeles. The girls all live in the San Fernando Valley, but all the action is, higher up. We get some class consciousness here. This kind of sad musings among the girls that, if only they weren't in the valley, if only they were up in the hills, then their lives would be so much better. Later, we do move up into the hills, and it doesn't really work out too well for Madge, not initially, anyway. I've heard it said that money can't buy happiness, but so they're all trying to, they're trying to save Annie, and there's a lot of searching for her in the film, and critics have they have been critical of what the last act of the film, which you get the action in it. It doesn't seem unlikely to me. I remember when I was a teenager. Teenagers often get into very stupid situations, particularly if alcohol is involved, where one might wake up the next morning and think, did that really happen? Apparently it did. Golly, I'm lucky to be alive. I will say there is a set piece in this film, an action set piece of a chase, a man in a car or people in a car chasing a man, Scott Baio, on a skateboard. And there's no question in my mind that this was the basis for the famous similar scene in Back to the Future, which came out, 6 years later? 5 or 6 years later. I'm not going to spoil the ending for you. Of course, the events in this film, they're rather telegraphed. There's some people who, well, let's say their habit of living is such that without some sort of miracle, there's not going to be, a happy ending, But I highly recommend this film. Again, because one becomes used to just these disgusting films about teenagers where it's all, people are just, they're all just talking about sex all the time, or making fart jokes, or just being as gross as possible, and the idea that they're just stick figures, they're just straw men or women, and their whole existence on screen is for us to mock them. Jodie Foster's her scenes with Sally Kellerman are particularly good in this regard, because, of course, the age-old adult versus young person controversy. You don't take us seriously. Well, if you start acting as a serious person, then we would take you seriously, etc., etc. And, of course, particularly in recent times, teenagerhood has been carved out into a discrete unit, and to a large extent, teenagers are supposed to act in this way. It is no longer seen as a transitionary period to leading to adulthood. It's seen as something, as a discrete entity that one should mourn leaving behind. This is available on Blu-ray, on an excellent transfer on Kino, and again, I really enjoyed this movie. It's a real surprise. It's a real hidden gem, and it has its anthropological and sociological attractions as well. 1980 in Los Angeles, or I guess the film would have been shot in 1979, where, the surfer culture is beginning to be supplanted by punk or new wave culture. And there's a lot of great location shooting. And I have to say that the Los Angeles depicted, I mean, the streets, the boulevards, it just seems nightmarish, absolutely nightmarish. It's like something out of Dante, you know. But of course, I'm sure that if you've seen that Randy Newman video for I Love LA, one can construct an entirely different and glorious view of Los Angeles from filming on the various boulevards. So those are my thoughts about Adrian Lyne's Foxes. Let's take a final look at the chat. Hollywood started pandering to teens transparently in the 80s, says Halper. Those films are even more disgusting in retrospect. Hello to Media Hits. Today is Ray Davis's birthday, says Chogakin 666. Fatal Attraction was the second highest grossing movie in 1987. I've seen this movie, right? Of course, everyone has seen it. The nightmare for Michael Douglas is when Glenn Close starts calling his house. That's sufficient of a nightmare. Everything else that happens, the bunny boiling, the kidnapping of the child or whatever, okay, we get it. This woman is evil. We understood that already. Nope, but let's just show she's even more evil than that, even more evil. And so, of course, the whole point of this is, well, she's got to be killed, and preferably in the most painful fashion necessary. I mean, there is a much more subtle and better film could have been made about this. Okay, you have a one-night stand with a woman when your wife is away, and you think, oh, we're adults, and this woman seems to think that it meant more than it did, and this woman wants to be part of my life going forward, and that's all it was needed. That's all that was needed. They've really infantilized teens in recent decades, says La Desperachisto. Glenn Close, a true method actor, says Media Hits. In case anyone cares, 3 Men and a Baby was the highest grossing movie of 1987. Yeah, okay. I reviewed Three Godfathers, the John Wayne film, some months ago? Or a year ago or so? On Theater Thursday. That's a much, much better film on the same theme. We can't change a diaper. When disposable diapers were invented, it's easy. Anyone can do it. Cloth diapers with safety pins. There was a technique to that. Disposable fitted diapers. No, any idiot can do it. Any idiot. No Peter Frampton posters, says Chogan 666. Those were de rigueur. Jacob's Ladder captures the horror of the Vietnam War for great grunt soldiers who faced death in the jungle. It also depicted the horror of the drug experiments on soldiers to make them more aggressive, says Star Rover. Porky's is a feast for any cinephile, says Popcasso 88. Yeah, Bob Clark, a Canadian, made that, as well as A Christmas Story. He was murdered, I believe, by an illegal immigrant in the United States. I just rewatched the Maltese Falcon for the nth time. What a great movie. It goes to show how far great atmosphere, attitude, and dialogue will take you. And Joel Cairo remains very, very, very gay. I enjoy the Maltese Falcon a great deal. Teenage boys are messy. In my experience, teenage girls less so. It's a funny thing about teenage girls, or, women for that matter, that you find higher standards, in of cleanliness, hygiene, whatever, in group settings among males. With women, it's like, why is it my business to clean up after someone else? Well, someone has to do the cleaning. If you got a bunch of people sharing a bathroom, it's not my job to do this. Well, come on. Maybe you could institute a rota system or something. Anran says, I only know about the rabbit and Ann Archer looking great in it. She does look great in it. No question about it. I watched the whole Runaways movie in a moment of indiscretion, says Helper. I bought the first Runaways record, and I love the song Cherry Bomb. And I love the interviews they gave, particularly the one they gave in Cream magazine, where they were just savaging Patti Smith, saying, "Oh, saggy, she has to wear a bra," stuff like this. It was great stuff, But the Runaways, watching that Runaways movie, I thought, okay, now it's confirmed. Rock music is not a suitable occupation for women. Kevin was a little hard on Scott Baio, says Anran. Joni and Chachi, not an attractive couple. Not an attractive couple. They're supposed to be America's sweethearts? Is Kevin's pronunciation of bio, is it bio? I don't know. I don't know. What, he's right-wing now, a Trump supporter, I believe, and he's hated for that. You want California Gothic, says Chogokin 666. Watch Dogtown and Z-Boys. Close played a woman police captain. Good role, says Media Hits. That was in The Shield, right? She was quite good in that, I thought. Of course, I like The Shield very much indeed. Anyway, that's it for today. I will be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. And on the book club, I will be discussing Christopher Lash's The Revolt of the Elites. Thank you all for tuning in. I greatly appreciate it. If you would like to make a donation to the live stream, my PayPal account is linked to kevin_grace@hotmail.com. And if you're in Canada, donations to the live stream may be made directly via interact@kevingrace@shaw.ca. And I leave you with this. In these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to forge a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.